The story begins with a streamer finally achieving the status of king and ascending to the throne of souls, with the system congratulating him for being the first king to sit on the throne of souls and informing him that the reward will be given once he meets the specific conditions. The protagonist was genuinely happy, celebrating with his friends and live stream followers for finally reaching that level, until suddenly a being appears and stabs him, saying that he is a mere insect and that his heresy will not go unpunished. Shortly after, the Prota hears some people saying that there's an injured man there in his 20s and that he's bleeding a lot. He also hears that this person's heartbeat is weak and that he'll need a defibrillator. The Prota hears the countdowns and feels the shock, but he can't wake up. The doctors try again, but nothing happens. Then, on the third attempt, he wakes up, startled, wondering what had happened, as he was in a strange place full of corpses. He tries to remember more, but the only thing that comes to mind is that he was stabbed by a mysterious person. He then wonders where he is, even considering that he might be in hell due to the piles of corpses, but quickly becomes upset, thinking he never blasphemed against God in his life, so he shouldn't be in hell. Soon, he feels a sharp headache, as if his head were going to explode, becoming even more puzzled by his inability to remember anything. Suddenly, something comes to his mind, and he's shocked to remember that his name was Bai Chi. He was 20 years old, and he used to be a game streamer before he died. He was never famous, but due to one of the last streams he had done, his follower count had increased. All this happened while he was playing an open-world RPG called Throne of Souls. The game was set in a medieval fantasy environment that was suddenly struck by the crash of an alien spaceship, blending classic fantasy elements with futuristic sci-fi works. Since the game's release, all players praised it for its extremely high-quality graphics and immersive storyline. However, after reaching a very advanced level in the game, many players started streaming their struggles in the more difficult stages. But that wasn't a problem for the Prota, as being one of the best in the entire community, he began receiving more attention for his gameplay. However, the extreme difficulty made many people give up on the game and stop following the content. Suddenly, a system voice appears, telling the Prote that even though he had died, he would still remain alive. More specifically, the system explains that he had reborn, then asks if the side effects of rebirth were starting to fade. The Prota, startled, turns around and asks who said that, as the voice was very familiar. The system informs him that he was being analyzed from a higher perspective, and that each game created generates its own world. The Prota, intrigued, wonders if the voice he's hearing is from the Game World platform assistant, only to hear the system again explaining that his death was the special condition needed to activate the reward key of rebirth, and that, therefore, he has now been reborn in the world of Throne of Souls. He's confused by the idea of being reborn in the world of Throne of Souls, but then remembers the special reward he had received when he finally achieved the status of king and ascended to the Throne of Souls, wondering if the reward was this chance to be reborn, since he didn't even know exactly how he had died. However, he's pleased because this is a chance to return to life, but he quickly becomes frustrated, asking the system why it didn't place him in the world of bikini beauties from the game Memories of a Summer, and why he has to be reborn in that hell that is the world of Throne of Souls, saying it would have been better to have died for good, as that way he wouldn't suffer as much. The system explains to the Prota that the key of rebirth is an exclusive reward for the world of Throne of Souls, as the other games, unfortunately, don't have a similar feature. Intrigued, Bai Chi asks what unfortunately means, as it seems that his system wasn't too happy about it. He believes that a game like Throne of Souls would never give such a valuable reward like a free rebirth to anyone, and wonders why they want something from him. The system responds that it's quite simple. They just need him to do what he does best, sit on the Throne of Souls again. And if he manages to repeat that feat, he will receive an even better reward, called the Key of Time Travel, which will allow him to travel to other worlds in Game World or even return to his original world. The Prota is surprised by this reward, asking why they didn't give it to him before. Bai Qi, intrigued, tells the system that although the reward is interesting, what his system is asking for is impossible, since the game doesn't even have an infinite rebirth mechanic. After all, in a world as complicated as Throne of Souls, even a dog on the road could end his life. The system responds that although there is indeed no infinite rebirth mechanic, he won't be defenseless. His account on the Game World platform has 100 platinum games from various genres, and he will be able to complete special missions and tasks to acquire the skills and items of the protagonists from those 100 games and use them in Throne of Souls. At that moment, Bai Qi is impressed, realizing he could accumulate various skills from the games he had platinumed, and he imagines that things are starting to get interesting. Looking at his Game World collection, he recalls that he has always been a fan of all kinds of games and never limited himself to streaming just the most popular ones at the time. That's why these games are from all sorts of genres imaginable, from bestsellers to indie productions, and even visual novels. He becomes excited, imagining that using the skills and items from these games in the world of Throne of Souls would be quite intriguing. The system explains that the Prote could also choose to live as a common human, without any abilities, as the choice was entirely his, with no objections. After hearing this, he ponders, thinking that if he lived as a common human, he would avoid the dangers of fighting bosses. But on the other hand, he would be subject to other mortal risks, like hunger. He quickly discards that option, as it made no sense. He then considers that maybe the system is planning something, since they presented this option only to make him even more determined to follow the path of the king. Bai Qi smiles and tells his system to stop joking around, saying he had already spent 20 years of his past life living as a common human. So, it seems like a joke that he would pass up this opportunity to be reborn and choose to live the same way again. He asks the system if there's any time limit to complete the main story and become king. Quickly, the system responds that there would be no time limit at all, then asks the Prota if he truly wishes to follow the main route to become king once again. Without thinking twice, the Prota replies that of course he would accept, as he'd be crazy not to. With that said, the system wishes him good luck on his new journey of ascension in the game Throne of Souls. After returning from his game world, he's confused as he hears someone calling him, telling him to look up, only to realize that it was a girl tied up, hanging upside down. She says she thought he had died there and asks what he's doing back alive, and if, by any chance, he's a reborn. This girl is a mage elf named Glory, one of the princess's guards, and is at level 21. Along with her, there are 3 more people tied up. Glory quickly tells the Prota that it doesn't matter why he's alive, urging him to try and get them down before the monsters return, as they need to get out of there as soon as possible. Hoshi, who is also one of the princess's guards, with his class as a human warrior, gets angry with Glory, asking if she really thought that the cowardly Prote would try to save them, since he was just crying and calling for his mother during the attack. Hoshi becomes even more irritated remembering that they had been betrayed, and if it weren't for that, they wouldn't be in the current situation. Dagu, completely calm, responds that nothing made sense at that moment, and points out that everyone there was going to be killed. Dagu is also part of the princess's guard, and his class is that of a beast hunter. Bai Qi, observing Princess Mina, becomes intrigued by the Star Kingdom, about her and her guards, as all those names were quite familiar to him, until the Prota remembers, becoming alarmed, that they were all NPCs he shouldn't encounter at the beginning of the game, and that the dungeon, ululating cave, wasn't part of the initial map either. He becomes even more frightened because just imagining it already gave him chills, and if he had chosen to be born as an ordinary human, he would already be dead at that moment. He was in the ululating cave dungeon, where the recommended level was between 20 and 30. The Prota, however, was a human without a class, being only level 1. Looking around, he says that it was expected that the system would do something of that level to him, as he couldn't understand what had happened. The sequence of territories was completely scrambled, He should have been reborn in the initial territory, Kafir Anka, for levels 1 to 10, then proceed to the Burnt Jungle, a territory for players of levels 10 to 20, and only then move on to the level 20 to 30 territory, Ululating Cave, to save Princess Mina and her group, who were hanging upside down, to gather enough strength to complete the dungeon. After imagining all of this, the Prota decides to change his mind, thinking that he should first choose a class quickly and find a way out of there. He then asks his system, which begins the class selection process. Quickly, the system informs him that the class selection process has started, asking the Prote to choose his class. The first option is the Warrior class, a melee combat class that uses a shield and a longsword, balancing defense and attack. The second option is the Mage class, a long-range class that uses staves and spells, balancing attack and support magic. The Assassin class is a melee and long-range combat class, able to use daggers and throwing knives, with high attack power and agility. There is also the Hunter class, a melee and long-range combat class that uses a one-handed staff or bow and arrows, capable of controlling elemental power to enhance attacks. And finally, the No class option, where a player without a class is despised by everyone. It has no additional skills or attributes, starting the game with cloth clothing and a basic staff. After observing all these classes, the Prota replies that there was no need to show them all, since he would choose the same class he picked when he played Throne of Souls for the first time, opting for no class. His system is baffled by the Prota's choice, saying that with so many useful class options, he chose the one with the worst skills and attributes. Bai Qi, confident in his choice, explains to the system that class choice in the game Throne of Souls is extremely important for the player's initial survival. However, in the next class advancements, secondary classes must be chosen that are related to the main class. The No class option is the one with the highest difficulty for survival in the game, but it's the only one that allows the player to find an NPC to increase attributes and perform class changes without restrictions. The Prota also clarifies that even though it's the hardest, it's also the most rewarding, and moreover, it comes with hidden resources. With this class, he will be able to complete the achievements of all classes without needing to restart the game to create characters for each of the other classes. He also emphasizes that it was precisely because of this that he became the first player to obtain all the achievements in the game Throne of Souls. The system says it understands, affirming that his speech was worthy of the best player they had. Therefore, the system informs the Prota that his main mission has been updated. His mission is to survive and reach the exit of the Ed, the Ululating Cave, and the mission reward will be Account Unlock Points, 1 point. The system explains that these account unlock points serve to unlock 25% of the items in the current game account's warehouse or any other account with no level restrictions on use, or randomly unlock a new game account along with the corresponding 25% usage rights for items and abilities. Bai Qi returns to the game, imagining that he just needs to get out of that dungeon alive, and soon hears Princess Mina's group asking him to go to the rope tied in front of him and untie them so they can get out of there together. The Prota walks to the rock holding the ropes and becomes thoughtful, wondering whether or not he should untie them, as they had no idea what could happen if he released the ropes. Remembering that last time he had cut the ropes and everyone was happy, wanting to wake the princess to get out of there as quickly as possible. However, they didn't notice an attack coming toward Glory, who was struck and slammed hard into the cave wall. Soon after, they were frightened when the leader of the Plague Clan, the Bloody Axe, appeared before them. Bai Qi still remembers that last time. As soon as he cut the ropes that held them, it automatically triggered the boss battle of the cave. He imagines that this battle will be very difficult and that everyone will need to give their best. But if he tries to fight without any skills or attributes, he will end up dead. Thinking about this, he concludes that he should leave the cave alone to receive his reward and perhaps return later to save them. Since, being important NPCs for the story, their lives are not his priority at that moment. So, after recalling how the events would unfold if he cut the rope and helped them, the Prota turns around, deciding not to help them. Glory, furious, asks the Prota where he is going and if he's crazy to leave them there to die. Hoshi, however, comments that he had already said before not to waste time on the Prota, as he was just a cowardly, classless boy, and he'd bet a lot of money that the Proto wouldn't survive a minute alone there. Baichi hears the insults but pays no attention and responds that he wouldn't waste time explaining things to them, because even if he told them, they wouldn't believe him. He imagines that the time is almost right. As he walks, the Prota comes across a level 5 Plague Clan hatchling and prepares himself. The monster notices the Prota and lets out a roar, while the princess's group starts laughing, saying that even though it's just a level 5 hatchling, it would be enough to defeat the Prota, who is level 1, and to make matters worse, is classless. The monster quickly charges at the Prota, who stays on guard, thinking that even though he didn't choose to save that bunch of idiots, he would still get out of there alive, even though it's difficult to defeat a level 5 monster with his current level. The monster attacks the Prota, who dodges by rolling backward, then dodges again by rolling to the side without losing any health points, leaving the monster confused, as it couldn't hit him at all. Hoshi, surprised, asks how the Prote managed to dodge 2 consecutive attacks, wondering if perhaps he was lucky. Glory responds that it wasn't luck, explaining that even though the dodges weren't perfect, he performed them at the exact moment. The Prota gets excited, realizing that apparently there was no delay between his mind and his movements, and even though he didn't have additional attributes or skills, he still had all the experience he'd accumulated from playing the game for so long. At that moment, the Plague Clan hatchling throws a bomb at the Prota, which explodes immediately. However, the Prota emerges from the explosion smoke, charging at the monster, which was confused, never imagining the Prota would emerge from the explosion, hitting the monster's head right after. After battling for a while, Baichi gets irritated and says he's going to finish it. He says this as the monster roars, charging at him. However, the Prota lands a blow on the monster's head, and due to the force, its head spins uncontrollably, finishing it off. Glory can't believe that the Prota managed to defeat the level 5 Plague Clan hatchling without a scratch on his body, and to top it off, with only a basic staff. Hoshi admits that he underestimated him, but seeing how much he struggled to defeat just one level 5 monster, he comments that it will be impossible for him to get out of there alive. Baichi sits on top of the monster to rest, thinking that even though he can dodge due to his combat experience, he won't be able to overcome the attack power difference anytime soon, as his attributes are very low and his weapons are even weaker. He knows that this won't be relevant, as he chose to play as no class, and will need to play in an unconventional way, avoiding all fights that aren't absolutely necessary. The system notifies him that he has defeated the level 5 Plague Clan hatchling and received 100 soul points, 2 gold coins, and the item Broken Mace, along with an additional 5 attack points. Baichi quickly opens his status window, knowing it would look terrible, as he still needs 900 more soul points to level up. His main goal is to escape the ululating cave as quickly and safely as possible. He picks up his broken mace from the ground and gets up, while the princess's group desperately asks the Prote to save them, promising to give him whatever he wants. At that moment, Princess Mina wakes up, asking Glory to stop begging, as the Prota can't even deal with his own problems. Mina makes it clear to the Prota that even if his choice is not to save them, she respects his decision. However, she advises him that in life or death situations, he should always be very careful. Baichi imagines that even in the face of death, she remains calm and elegant, truly worthy of being the princess of the Star Kingdom. He continues walking through the cave, saying that he had his own plan from the start, but didn't want to mention it because they wouldn't believe him if he said he would come back to save them. Hoshi, furious, asks the Prota if he's trying to mock them. Mina asks her guard to stop, saying that if he has the energy to yell, he should use it to think of a way to get them out of there. The Prota imagines that in the original story, even if he didn't save them, they would still find a way out, but that would make him lose many rewards and achievements related to Princess Mina, and that saving them or not will all depend on how he manages to reach the exit safely and what rewards he will receive. He knows that making allies is extremely important, but his survival is his priority. After all, the ululating cave contains many valuable secrets. He's passed through it so many times that he knows each one like the back of his hand. Therefore, if he wants to encounter as few enemies as possible, he'll have to take a certain path where the Prota will need to meet a specific character. After walking a bit through the cave, Baichi reaches a certain spot, approaches a large jar, and hears someone asking from inside the jar who's there, since they don't smell like a Plague Clan hatchling, asking the Prota not to be afraid and to come closer, as they would explain why they were trapped inside the jar. Then, they explain that they came to the cave in search of treasure and hid in the jar to escape the monsters, but ended up stuck there and never managed to get out, begging the Prote to please free them. Without thinking twice, the Prota breaks the jar, freeing them. This person is Lucci, who is at level 27. He's surprised, as the Prota really saved him, saying that he owes him one, and that if he ever needs something, he just has to ask. And if it's within his reach, he'll gladly help. Baiki, desperate, asks Lucci for help, explaining that his friends were captured by the beasts, and he wanted to save them, but couldn't, because at his current level, it would be impossible. Lucci, observing the Prota's request, says that he is brave but not very smart, and assures him that he will help and that everything will be fine because he is with him. After walking a bit, they come face to face with a monster that, upon noticing them, charges immediately. It's already an adult ogre from the Plague Clan. At level 18, Lucci blocks the monster's attack, but loses some of his life, and, furious, asks the monster if it was the one who imprisoned him in the jar. He drives his sword into the monster's belly, taking half its HP, saying that because he was stuck inside the jar, he almost died. But, without wasting time, he delivers another blow, shouting that the one who would die would be the monster. The Prota, watching Lucci, is impressed. After finishing off the monster, Lucci steps on the severed head of the Plague Clan monster, saying that he would never have dared to come there in search of treasures if he wasn't confident in his abilities. After that, they continue walking through the cave, and near the cliff, the Prota says he heard his friends' voices coming from there and doesn't know how much longer they will hold out, warning Lord Lucci that they need to find a way to save them as soon as possible. Lucci responds that it would be quite simple. He says this and kicks the Prota, knocking him into the abyss, while stating that he had an idea and would solve it in the blink of an eye. As the Prota falls, screaming, Lucci crouches near the precipice and apologizes, saying that his old habits never die and that he can never resist the temptation when he sees someone standing at the edge of a cliff. He says this laughing, but he is certain the Prota could have resisted the push if he wanted to, even though he saved him. He had already realized that Baiki is a reborn. Baiki, at the bottom of the cliff, yells at Lucci, asking how he figured it out. Lucci just responds with another question, asking how he fell from such a high cliff and was still alive. The Prota, with his hand on his rib and his HP extremely low, says that if he had jumped on his own, he would have certainly died. But with Lucci's push, he managed to survive. However, even though he didn't die, the Prota complains about the pain from his ruptured organs. But at least he's happy, because he knows exactly what items he can find down there. The system informs him that he obtained a blood soul bottle and a fragment of a shining stone. Lucci turns and says he had heard that these reborn were strange, and that, instead of kicking the Prota, he should have stabbed him to make sure he was dead. He wonders how he could have made such a mistake, but since the Prota was stuck down there, it's not like he has many chances of survival, and he says he'll wait there until the Prote dies. The Prota explains that Lucci is a cunning NPC who loves to kick players from cliff edges. However, the game has a mechanic that allows survival from falls when the person is thrown, and that's the only way to access certain locations. But soon, he becomes intrigued, as the term reborn was never a mechanic present in Throne of Souls, and he wonders what the system was trying to do with that. He thinks about it and soon takes a potion that fully restores his HP, while the system explains to him that most of the information about the reborn is blocked, and the only thing he can know at that moment is that reborn refers to those who came back from death under unknown special conditions. Baiki becomes curious about the system's explanation and considers that it will definitely be something very important he will have to discover in the future, as everyone he had encountered so far was not happy to learn that he was a reborn. He then decides it would be better to hide it from that moment on. Using his shining stone to light the way, he figures he'll have to put that aside because even if the plague beasts weren't down there, the terrain is very rugged. He needs to gather his energies because the real danger was just beginning. He says this as he stands before the secret area of the Howling Cave, Lost Ruins, whose level is unknown. Baiki also explains that Throne of Souls is an open-world action-adventure game. The game's plot is divided into various side quests, making players need to find clues from different NPCs, monsters, bosses, ruins, and places to uncover the world's truths. And, since he is a player who had already finished the game, it was obvious that he knew everything about it. In the heart of that world, Pasqualo, there is a crystal called the Soul of the World, where all races lived in harmony under the crystal's protection and energy, until one day, an alien spaceship called the Unmanned Advanced Spacecraft crashed into that world. Coincidentally, the spot where the spaceship crashed was exactly where the Soul of the World was located, and the entire foundation of the world was destroyed. The Prota also comments that, although this seemed like the end of Pasqualo, it wasn't, because the world continued to adapt, giving rise to new species and different civilizations. And the place where he was at that moment was the abandoned ruins of the underground civilization. He becomes worried because in those ruins, at the bottom of the Howling Cave, there is a secret exit through a river. The mission only stated that he needed to reach the exit, but never specified which exit it should be, and that makes his life much easier. Although the path is not guarded by the Plague Clan, the mortality rate there is much higher because it is necessary to calculate precisely where he will land to avoid hitting the stalactites protruding from the walls. Baisi also knows that if he is not careful, he will end up dying, but with all the experience accumulated from dying countless times there, reaching the bottom won't be a problem for him. The Prota is sure of one thing. An important piece of information is that the opening narrows as you descend into the pit, and even though he remembers the location of each platform, he figures it's better to proceed with caution. However, Baiki barely begins to descend and already slips, having to move quickly to land on another edge. He feels relieved, imagining he almost made a fatal mistake and is now almost at the bottom, needing to proceed more carefully. But then, someone appears behind him, asking if by any chance the Prote was trying to leave already. This startles Baisi, who quickly turns and strikes with his mace. But Harvey jumps back, dodging the attack and landing on one of the edges, while the Prota yells, asking who he is. This person is Harvey, level 28, and his class is Elemental Archer. He laughs and asks the Prota if he scared him by any chance, and says that Baiki is too hot-headed for a level 1 unclassed player. He also makes it clear that if he wanted, he could have easily ripped out the Prota's heart before he even had time to react. Frightened, the Prota yells at Harvey, asking who he was and why he appeared out of nowhere, until Baiki remembers that when he fell off the cliff, he asks Lucci if he wasn't the corpse that was at the bottom of the cave recently, and if, by any chance, he was a reborn too. Lucci starts laughing, moving like a madman, saying that the Prota is too slow and that he doesn't blame him because he will have to face someone who has already been reborn as a level 28 Elemental Archer, and it was very unfortunate for the Prota to be a classless reborn, still at level 1. He says this, and quickly appears behind the Prota, ready to strike, saying that he is so irrelevant that he doesn't even feel like killing him. Baiki is scared because he didn't expect Lucci to be so fast. But before the Prota has time to do anything, he is attacked, losing half of his HP. Baiki falls to his knees, coughing heavily, and asks Lucci why he is trying to hurt him, as he had done nothing to him. He also comments that since they were both reborn, they should help each other instead of fighting. Lucci jumps in front of the Prota and asks if, by any chance, the system hadn't warned him that all living beings are enemies to a reborn, but the greatest enemy of all is other reborn. He also comments that after seeing the Prota moving across the platform with such mastery, he thought there was something special about him. However, he was wrong, as it seems the Prota doesn't even know the basics and is wasting the chance of rebirth. Baiki becomes furious and, with great difficulty, strikes an attack, while telling Lucci to disappear, as he would never believe his lies. But Lucci cuts the Prota's mace in half, letting out a malicious laugh, and comments that a brat like the Prota at level 1 would never understand, and that he won't waste any more time. In exchange for having shown the way to that point, he won't kill him. Lucci then jumps back, bidding farewell to the Prota and saying that whether he lives or dies will depend solely on him, and if he manages to survive, he can seek him out for revenge. At that moment, Baiki can barely breathe and asks his system what the hell is going on, and what other information about the reborn the world is hiding from him. The system quickly responds that it's not hiding anything, and explains that the blocked information needs to be unlocked through effort. And, thanks to recent events, 3 new pieces of information about the reborn can now be revealed. The first is that the reborn are seen in the current world as beings of extreme evil and will be hated by all other races. The reason for this is still locked. The reborn seem to possess a greater cruelty and thirst for blood. The reason for this is also still locked. And when the player starts their journey, they can gain many soul points and experience points by killing other reborn, and they can also obtain blood soul points to unlock new accounts. The second is that reborn is the term used to refer to beings who have been reborn in the current world, but the term is not limited exclusively to humans. The reason for this is also not unlocked, and the reborn will appear in the current world with random race, gender, class, identity, and levels. Low-level reborn will be quickly recognized by high-level reborn, except for the classless, as all other classes have initial information about the reborn. The third piece of information the system explains is that the classless can obtain special information when they advance in class. However, the information about the system differences for each reborn has not yet been unlocked. Due to paralysis in his body, the Prota begins to fall from the precipice, wondering why the system took so long to explain to him, as he was already dying, imagining that the world of Throne of Souls is indeed very chaotic. But he tries with all his might to hold on to the beams on the wall, and with all his strength grabs one, saying that he will never give up and will not waste his rebirth, as he was almost at the end of the cave. He then lets go, thinking that even though the pain is unbearable, he needs to keep moving forward because there's not much left, falling from beam to beam until he finally crashes to the ground with his HP very low. Trembling from the pain, the Prota laughs, imagining that he has won, that the exit is just 10 meters away, and that he just needs to crawl a little and he'll be out of that hell. But he quickly becomes worried when he hears and smells something strange, soon becoming scared, as a level 25 fanged worm has just appeared in front of him, a rare type of monster. He wonders why the hell there's a monster like that here, as he remembers that there weren't supposed to be any monsters at that exit. Then he imagines that he needs to take advantage of the monster's slow movements and crawl to the exit as quickly as possible, but the fanged worm splits into several sinister little monsters, which begin to surround the Prota, making him even more terrified, as he hadn't expected the monster to split so soon, taking on its second stage form, and that, indeed, the monster shouldn't exist there, let alone in its current form. Finding all of this very strange, Baiki becomes surprised, suspecting that perhaps it was Lucci who lured the monster there to kill him. He grows frustrated as the appearance of the fanged worm had completely ruined all his perfectly laid plans. He then considers that if things continue like this, he will end up truly dying. But the monster wastes no time and leaps toward the Proto to devour him. Baiki jumps to the side, falling into an acid river, thinking that he had fought countless battles before, and that they shouldn't underestimate him because he wouldn't be caught so easily. He starts screaming in pain, realizing that the underground river had become an acid river. After years of accumulated pollution, it can melt almost any living being, even with the agony of having his flesh melted, a pain worse than death. He asks them not to underestimate his will to stay alive. Though the acid river is corroding him down to the bones, he still has some tissue left to protect himself. However, for the fanged worms, who are completely exposed, the river's water is lethal. As Baiki crawls toward the exit, his health decreases gradually due to the river's corrosion, but he feels somewhat relieved as the fanged worms are scared of the river. He makes it clear that he will not accept living a life like the one he had before, full of regrets and frustrations. He explains that he was born in a small village in the countryside, near many mountains. He thought that the only way to improve his life was to be accepted into a prestigious school in the capital, and that's why he abandoned his mother and his hometown. He also recalls when he was working hard at his job, and his former boss yelled at him, asking why he was so slow and telling him that if he didn't improve, he could leave. And at night, he had no peace either, as his roommate drove him crazy, saying that he did nothing during the day, and at night, he studied with a flashlight, disturbing his sleep. However, Baiki also explains that despite going through many hardships, he never gave up because of the hope he held in his heart. He then explains that fortunately, he was accepted into the university of his dreams. However, soon after, his mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and that's when his world fell apart. So many years of effort and hard work were in vain. Even though he dropped out of school, took on other part-time jobs, and took out loans, he wasn't able to save his mother. Baiki also comments that working in streaming games became his life. Even though things weren't getting better, his popularity skyrocketed thanks to a certain game. However, just as he was about to reach the peak of his career, he was killed inexplicably. And not too long ago, he didn't care whether he was alive or dead. But now, he wouldn't accept dying that way. Having the chance to be reborn in the world of a game he knew, only to die pathetically, was totally out of the question. Thinking this, he stands up and leaps toward the cave's exit, telling the fanged worms that he wouldn't stand still, waiting for death to catch up with him. He makes it clear that to become the king of that world, he wouldn't die there. He says this as some of the monsters bite into his body, leaving him with only 3% of his health. However, he reaches the exit. Immediately, the system notifies him that he has successfully escaped the Howling Cave, and for that, he has earned one account unlock point, asking the Proto to choose between the following options. The first, it allows him to unlock items from his old account with 25% of the original attributes in his current account storage, which can be random and without level restrictions. The second, it allows him to unlock 25% of the resources of a new account with one item and one skill. While being devoured by the monsters, the system informs that the Prote selected the first option, stating that 25% of his storage items have been unlocked and will arrive immediately. After that, an intense energy bursts out of the Proto, finishing off the monsters that were on his body. With the items in his inventory, he immediately uses the Essence of Sacred Blood, which instantly restores 100% of his health and increases his versatility points by 30. Baiki also equips his Blood Shadow set, a professional assassin set that greatly boosts agility and intelligence, with the set's special effect being the Shadow Thrust. Lastly, he equips the Scarlet Assassin Dagger, a dual dagger and the best weapon for assassins, offering high attack speed and lethality. When equipped, it unlocks the ability Scarlet Fireworks. At that moment, a massive explosion occurs, with numerous attacks striking the fanged worms. The Prota comments that he had said it wouldn't be easy to defeat him, as he had held on until the last moment, because that's how a future king should act. He says this, releasing incredible power, causing lightning to shoot out of his body. However, the monsters are undeterred and charge at the Prota, who quickly counterattacks, delivering countless slashes, easily eliminating several fanged worms. Baiki is pleased, realizing that choosing to retrieve his old account items was the right decision. Even though it was only 25% of the original attributes, it was more than enough to get him through the initial stages, especially since he only keeps the best items in his inventory. The Prota becomes confident, stating that from that moment on, his true story would begin. However, he doesn't notice the fanged worms merging again, forming a massive monster, ready to devour the Prota. He just gets frustrated, asking the monster why it was screaming so much. At that moment, the system informs Baiki that the secret mission has been updated, instructing him to kill the fanged worm, and if successful, he will receive 3 soul points as a reward. He throws his daggers into the air, getting excited by the system's notification, then catches them and prepares himself, as that was exactly the reward he was aiming for. He says this and uses his ability, Scarlet Fireworks, asking the monster if it was ready to become his first prey. He then charges at the monster with full force, shouting that the real battle between them was about to begin. As he approaches the monster, the protagonist shouts, telling it to die already. Dodging the monster's attack right after, he comments that he already knew its attack patterns well, and just needed to be fast enough to avoid them. He then plunges his dagger into the monster, slicing it entirely with his Supreme Pain ability, making it clear that he would return all the pain the monster caused him twofold. Next, he uses Scarlet Burn, making the monster scream in agony. The system explains that the Scarlet Burn ability is a debuff applied using Scarlet Fireworks, and the Scarlet Flames burn the wound, causing damage over 15 seconds. The Supreme Pain ability, on the other hand, is a debuff applied by the Assassin's combat skill. The depth of the cut reaches the bone, causing supreme pain. Due to this combo of abilities, the monster doesn't stop screaming in pain. The protagonist prepares again and asks the monster if it's feeling a lot of pain, suggesting he might be able to ease it. He then uses his Shadow Assassination ability, and several clones of the protagonist appear around the monster. The system explains that the Shadow Assassination ability is an execution skill of assassins, where the user's body divides into several shadow clones that attack the target simultaneously. The shadow clones are immune to all physical and magical attacks for 5 seconds. With this, the protagonist charges at the giant worm, delivering countless strikes with his clones, finally defeating the toothed worm. The system informs that the protagonist successfully defeated the elite toothed worm and completed the side mission, receiving triple the reward, totaling 18,000 soul points. Immediately afterward, the monster's soul moves toward the protagonist. With this, a new achievement is unlocked, where a soft light burns more than a blazing flame. The monster's soul enters the protagonist's body, raising him to level 8. He is thrilled with the battle's outcome, as he managed to jump to level 8. Baiki explains that leveling up in the game, Throne of Souls, is really difficult, and in one of his live streams, he summarized the soul points required to level up in each stage of the game, a piece of content well received by his audience. Then, his system informs him that he received 108 gold coins and 2 units of a dirty crystal bottle, which restores 30% of life points. Additionally, the protagonist received the prayer Piercing of Suffering, a defensive prayer, where by kneeling and performing the prayer, a sharp blade is summoned to pierce all targets within a 3-meter radius, usable 3 times. Looking at his status, Baiki comments that this prayer is really good, and he had tried a lot to get it in the past, but now he got it on the first try. He believes that since he is following the assassin's path, Even with the item bonuses and being at the maximum level, the most important attribute at the moment is agility. He decides to allocate several attribute points into agility, especially since he's still at the beginning of the game. The protagonist also takes the opportunity to check his inventory to see which consumable items and crafting materials he can unlock soon. However, he is frustrated to see that he has many amazing items and weapons, but they are all locked, and it seems he is nowhere near unlocking them. Still, at least he unlocked the Assassin set, along with 2 more incredible items: the Blood Armored Dragon set, a Berserker set that can only be used with at least 80 strength, and the Heavy Armor, which cannot be controlled by ordinary people, accompanied by the Dragon Spine Sword, the only weapon capable of piercing a dragon's skin. It's a 2-handed sword made from the spine of a dragon, followed by the Starry Sky Prophet set, a mage set that can only be used with at least 100 magic power points. And with the set comes the Deep Space Lantern, a staff made from golden meteorites scattered across the universe, possessing high magical conductivity. Baiki imagines that even if he can't use the sets at the moment, the other weapons should guarantee him an easy life in the early stages of the game. As he walks through the dungeon, he wonders whether he should go back to save the princess and her group, or if it would be better to leave on his own, since from what he knows of the game, it wouldn't be a problem to become a lone wolf. But now that he has become a reborn, he's unsure how that will work. Wanting to know next how much the original game is altered by the appearance of the reborn, and whether there are other things about the reborn he hasn't yet discovered. Baiki still thinks that, until he finds the answers to these questions, it's best not to take risks wandering around alone, as the best choice really should be to stay with Princess Mina's group, because, in the original story, by saving Princess Mina and her group, they could all become his helpers in the future. He keeps in mind that even if the original story isn't followed and they try to kill him, he believes he can defend himself at this moment. Thinking this, he soon runs off to save them, defeating several monsters along the way. Stopping in front of 2 large enraged monsters, however, Baiki doesn't hesitate and uses his Piercing of Suffering ability, making several bloody spikes rise from the ground, which soon go towards the monsters, piercing and finishing them off. The protagonist is pleased as he had already killed almost all the monsters in the cave, with only the boss remaining. The monsters' souls go to the protagonist, making him level up to 10. His system congratulates him on his quick rise to level 10, informing him that he has unlocked the reputation system, asking him to check his reputation at any time and choose which allies and enemies he wants to make. He's confused by this reputation system, as it didn't exist before in the original game. He then considers that the lone wolf style, which he thought was good at the time, may not be so recommended now. He soon realizes that his relationship with Princess Mina is hostile due to his hesitation in helping them, feeling a bit embarrassed, imagining that they weren't happy with him at all. Meanwhile, in the place where the princess's group was tied up, the princess's guards were furious. Hoshi yells, commenting that the protagonist had gotten on his nerves, wanting to know how someone at level 1 could be so idiotic as to leave them there and walk away alone. Glory says that he had already heard that the reborn only care about themselves. The princess, hearing all this, asks them to stop talking nonsense, making it clear that they are trapped there for the simple reason that they are weak. She emphasizes that, being the leader of the group, it's all her fault, as she was the one who brought them all there to die, and then apologizes to everyone. Glory smiles and asks the princess what she's talking about, asking her not to apologize, as they all swore loyalty to her. Hoshi explains that they are not complaining because they are afraid of death, but because they don't want to see the princess's dream of restoring the country destroyed so soon. At that moment, 2 spinning daggers cut the ropes binding the princess's group. As they fall, they worry about the princess, as they must protect her at all costs. They hit the ground, and the princess falls on guard Hoshi, who cushions her fall, while Dagu lands on his feet, being a feline beast. and soon comments that it seems the protagonist wasn't dead yet. Hoshi, concerned about the princess, asks if she's all right, and she replies yes. Glory, not understanding anything, wants to know who saved them. The protagonist approaches them with his hood on and tells them not to worry, even though they have offended him, making it clear that he has decided to be the better person. They are surprised to hear the protagonist's voice. When he removes his hood, Baiki wants to know why they look so surprised, as he had warned them he would return to save them, and makes it clear that the real surprise is yet to come, explaining that the boss will arrive there in a minute. Then, he asks everyone to prepare for battle. The protagonist goes to the princess and cuts the ropes that were binding her hands. She comments that, regardless of the reasons, she is grateful, and that if it weren't for him, they would have been left there until they turned into skeletons. He explains that it's not the time for thanks, as the boss will arrive in 40 seconds, urging everyone to grab their weapons and get out of there. Hoshi, furious, tells the protagonist to lower his tone when speaking to the princess. Glory, on the other hand, is surprised, realizing that in less than half a day, the protagonist went from level 1 to level 10, commenting that the Reborn have secrets, and it seems that the protagonist is no exception. Baiki puts his hood back on, imagining that his provocations worked, deciding to continue with them. He then comments that if anyone there wants to kill or hurt him, go ahead, as he wouldn't mind, making it clear that without his combat strength, they won't be able to face the boss. Hoshi, still furious, asks the protagonist who he thinks he is, as he's acting cocky just because he reached level 10. However, the princess interrupts Hoshi, saying that against a big enemy, you can't act out of emotion, and orders everyone to enter combat mode. She says this, and immediately summons her glowing staff. Everyone quickly prepares for battle. Mina emphasizes that, despite many doubts, she still has hope and won't let more mistakes happen. Baiki is pleased, thinking that he was evaluating the princess during this brief moment, and it seems her personality hasn't changed, remaining fair and determined. He concludes that the hostility from the rest of the princess's group towards him is not because he's a reborn, but because he didn't save them earlier, meaning he can trust them for the next battle against the boss. The protagonist wastes no time and sets his thunder trap, warning that there are only 10 seconds left before the boss appears. The protagonist's thunder trap, when activated, releases lightning attacks and paralysis. He imagines Phase 1 is about to begin and asks Princess Mina's group to hold off the boss for 3 minutes. He says this and immediately starts disappearing, leaving everyone there confused as the protagonist suddenly became invisible. They wonder why he vanished and why they need to hold off the boss for 3 minutes. At that moment, a massive creature jumps and lands with a heavy thud, causing a huge explosion and destroying the landing area. Everyone is shocked to see that the boss arrived exactly when the protagonist said it would, wondering how that kid predicted it. This is the leader of the Plague Clan, Muik, the level 30 Blood Axe. Furious, he demands to know why everyone didn't stay quiet, tied up, and whether they really thought they could escape him. However, the boss steps on the trap the protagonist had left, activating it. A terrible electric shock courses through Muik's entire body, paralyzing him for a moment. Hoshi is in disbelief, wondering how the protagonist knew exactly where the boss would appear, as the trap was perfect. But the princess yells, telling him not to worry about that now, asking him to focus on the battle because they've just gained an advantage, with the boss paralyzed. She then asks everyone to concentrate their attacks on the boss, as they need to kill him at all costs. After the effect of the protagonist's trap wears off, Muik roars, asking if they really thought the trap would hold him for long, and if they really think they can kill him, charging at Hoshi with full force and delivering a powerful attack that forces the warrior to block. Hoshi can't believe the overwhelming power of Muik's attack, imagining that even with the block, he will take damage. Soon after, the boss notices some arrows coming his way and repels them with ease. Laughing, he makes it clear that cheap tricks won't work on him, but he soon notices his arm trapped by several vines. Furious, He demands that everyone there show their true skills, as the attacks he's taking aren't even making him feel ticklish, and he tells them to stop insulting him. Saying this, he uses his powerful axe for a circular attack, quickly cutting all the vines that were holding him. Muik then strikes another powerful blow, hitting the ground and causing destruction in the area, as Hoshi had jumped to the side to dodge the attack. At that moment, Muik takes advantage of the debris created by his attack and uses his all-direction shots ability, creating a vortex around his body and hurling the debris at the princess's group. But she quickly uses her ability and creates several energy shields around everyone, successfully defending them. Hoshi, furious, comments that the boss's attack was unavoidable and asks what the protagonist was thinking, leaving them at such a crucial moment. Glory, concerned for the princess, asks Hoshi to focus on their current situation, because if the boss continues to use strong attacks that force the princess to defend them, her magic power will run out quickly. The princess, however, remains focused on her ability, telling everyone not to worry about her, as she still has plenty of energy, and mentions that they can't just stay on the defensive, they need to find a way to counterattack. At that moment, Muik notices that the shields protecting everyone come from the princess and charges at her, preparing his powerful attack and commenting that she would suffer the consequences first since she seemed very important to the group. He says this and delivers his powerful attack, but Hoshi jumps in front, trying to block it, only to have his shield shattered instantly. Muik becomes even more furious and immediately prepares to strike again, asking Hoshi what the hell he thought he was doing, as there was no way someone as insignificant as him could block his attack. At that moment, the boss screams in pain and turns around, realizing it was the protagonist who had driven daggers into his back. He quickly asks Baiki what the hell he thought he was doing. The protagonist replies that he simply added a spice to the dagger and asks Muik if, by any chance, he didn't like it. He then explains that the spice in question was none other than poison made from the acidic river of the waters of hell, and the longer the poison stays in the body, the longer its effect will last. Muik gets irritated and asks Baisi if he was mocking his preferences, attacking him right after, but Baisi quickly leaps and easily dodges the attack. Hoshi, watching the protagonist's movements, is impressed, commenting that it was impossible for the protagonist to have such agility at only level 10. At that moment, Muik begins to scream in pain from the corrosive poison and asks the protagonist how he knew that the acid from the waters of hell would be fatal to the Plague Clan members. He becomes furious and remarks that the protagonist will pay for the insolence of making him look pathetic, delivering several attacks to the ground, causing massive destruction that spreads in all directions. The princess's group wonders if the boss had lost control and gone insane due to the poison. At that moment, Hoshi shouts, commenting that this was the chance they'd been waiting for, as the boss had weakened, urging everyone to attack immediately. However, Muik's attack heads towards a pile of decomposing bodies. Baiki, realizing what was happening, shouts, telling them to stop, and with that, a huge explosion occurs, sending the decomposing bodies flying everywhere. The corpses then begin to awaken, as the boss's attack was actually his corpse mutation ability, causing them all to rise and undergo a horrifying mutation. The protagonist, observing the chaotic scene, imagines that the battle has now entered Phase 2. He quickly turns, asking everyone to block the mutated corpses and leave the boss to him. Hoshi, furious, wants to know if the protagonist had gone crazy, as there was no way anyone could face Muik one-on-one. Mina shouts, interrupting Hoshi, and asks everyone to do as the protagonist said, then asks them to get into formation since they can't let any mutations get past them. At that moment, Muik, facing the protagonist, starts laughing, commenting that the protagonist is brave to want to face him alone, but makes it clear that he has already gotten used to the pain of the poison, then asks the protagonist to come at him with everything, as he wants to see his strength. Baiki prepares, thinking that the boss's adaptation speed was expected. On the other hand, the poison still has about a minute of effect, according to the original plan. Keeping in mind that as long as he doesn't die, the princess will be safe, he then decides that he will resolve this battle in the next minute. Muiwik begins to mock the protagonist, commenting that instead of wasting time thinking about how to defeat him, he should be thinking more about how to avoid being turned into minced meat. However, Baiki doesn't waste time, since he has only 1 minute to put an end to the battle, and uses his combat ability, Crimson Inferno. Charging straight at the boss, he comments that he liked the story of being turned into minced meat because that's exactly what he's going to do. However, as he advances towards Muik, the protagonist remembers the failed attempts to defeat the boss, thinking that Muik, the Blood Axe, is known for his tough skin and being fleshy, as he had already died about 30 times before finally getting past him. But soon, he notices the boss coming at him with full force as well. Having to quickly dodge Muik's attack, Baiki becomes worried, thinking that the boss attacks fast and has high offensive power. To make matters worse, Muik's weapon can still steal life. With his current HP and level, he can withstand at most 2 direct attacks. On the other hand, Baiki feels relieved, as he has high agility, and if he can dodge and survive for the next few minutes, using the poison on the boss to lower his HP, he can move on to the final battle. However, Muik wastes no time and hurls the remaining debris from his previous attack, wanting to know what happened to the protagonist, as he had said he would turn him into minced meat, but the only thing he's doing is running away. Then he asks him to face him head-on. Baiki quickly jumps away from the debris launched by the boss. Mina, intrigued, observes the protagonist's agility, noting how he had dodged the attack several times, and the way the protagonist understands the timing and range of the attacks is not something a novice would know, almost like a veteran who has been through several battles. But she soon considers that agility alone won't be enough. Muik, with his HP below half and still poisoned, comments that he understands the protagonist's strategy, saying that Baiki is only dodging his attacks to buy time for the poison to take effect. He says this and uses his terrifying ability, Blood Dance, then asks Baiki who will die first, him from the poison or the protagonist from his axe. Baiki, observing the boss, thinks that he's just reached the 3rd phase of the battle. At that moment, Mui comments that he wants to see the protagonist escape from his blood dance, launching a powerful attack immediately afterward. Baiki tries to block the attack with his knee, but his HP drops, and his leg is splattered with blood. Muik, seeing the protagonist's situation, bursts out laughing, saying that no matter how fast he is, he won't be able to escape his blood dance. Baiki remembers that in the 3rd phase, the boss's attack range increases greatly, and dodging without getting hurt is almost impossible. But he quickly changes his expression, becoming serious, as he had been waiting for this moment. Hoshi and Glory looked at the Prota, concerned, as Hoshi smelled a strong scent of blood coming from the boss. He remarked that, even though Baiki was good at dodging, he wouldn't escape this time, then asked Glory to leave the corpses to him, as he would help the Prota face the boss. Glory felt uneasy with his friend's request, as the awakened corpses were endless, and he couldn't hold them off alone. Meanwhile, a furious Muik prepared his attack. He launched the blow, but upon hitting the Prota's body, realized it hadn't connected, watching the Prota's body disappear. At that moment, Baiki appeared behind Muik, using his shadow attack skill. The boss turned around, confused, asking if this skill was some kind of teleportation and how someone of the Prota's level could have it. The Prota recalled how back when he played the game, he instinctively avoided the boss's fierce moves, knowing the key to beating this phase was close-range attacks. He then unleashed several strikes on Muik's back with his dagger, coated in acid from the infernal river. He remembered that in the 3rd phase, the boss's attack speed slowed down, as did his defense, allowing him to use shadow attacks to reach the right distance around the boss, managing the splash damage and trading blows. Muik, after receiving the Prota's attacks, began to scream in pain, his HP dropping to just 10%, and cursed the Prota, demanding to know why he always stabbed him in the back. Seeing the scene, Glory was incredulous, trying to understand what the hell was happening, as it seemed the Prota had turned the tide. Hoshi commented that Baiki didn't value his own life, as taking a heavy blow from that distance was pure recklessness. Dagu speculated if the Prota had discovered the boss's weakness. Muik kept trying to hit the Prota at all costs, but he was too agile, dodging all attacks with ease. Then, creating some distance, he went all in towards the boss, using his shadow clone ability and launching numerous strikes at Muik, who began to scream in agony. Enraged, Muik tried to hit the Prota with a sweeping attack, admitting he hadn't expected to be so pressured, but Baiki dodged once again. At that moment, Muik admitted it had been hard to acquire salvation items, but he'd have to use them on someone as insignificant as the Prota. He said this as he activated his Blood Siphon rune, a knockoff of the Deep Space item. With this rune, Muik could absorb the target's blood to recover his HP. Right afterward, he began to drain the life from the corpses, telling the Protea to wait until he regained his HP because he planned to tear him apart. To make things worse, the system announced that the boss's poison and burn debuffs had been nullified. Baiki began to sweat, genuinely worried, as he hadn't expected the boss to have Blood Siphon. He realized new features were emerging, things that hadn't been in the original game, and at such a critical moment. However, a massive magical shield appeared beneath Muik, who immediately felt confused, wondering why his skill had been interrupted. It was Princess Mina, using her Forbidden Barrier skill, summoning a magical shield around the target, severing his connection to the outside world and preventing healing or blessings. She shouted to the Prota, urging him not to panic, explaining that the boss's ability was just an imitation of the Deep Space item and that she could easily disable it with her spells. She then told everyone not to worry about the corpses and to focus solely on the boss, to strike him down in a single blow. At that moment, Muik became furious with the princess, charging at her with full force, accusing her of being the reason he was having so many issues and declaring he should have killed her from the start. The princess's guards grew concerned, as it was too late to defend her, but the Prota appeared, blocking Muik's powerful strike, which, from the impact, created a wave of air that spread throughout the area. Mina, witnessing everything, is shocked, as she couldn't do anything and quickly apologizes to Baiki. At that moment, the Prota uses one of his items, and an intense energy begins to envelop his entire body. He asked the princess not to apologize, as the fault was his for not having defeated the boss sooner. Muik prepares himself again, asking the Prota how long he plans to keep bothering him. Baiki and the princess also get ready, and the Prota makes it clear that his next move will be the last, as he intends to end the battle once and for all. Muik is startled, sensing something amiss, feeling an aura from the Prota that gives him a bad feeling, and realizing that the Prota's blood scent is even stronger than his. He turns and leaves, shouting to the Prota that he'll spare him this time. As the boss retreats, the effect of his skill fades, and the corpses begin to fall to the ground. The princess's guards approach her, and Hoshi apologizes for arriving too late to rescue her, nearly putting her in danger. She tells them not to worry, as everyone survived the boss, and that was the most important thing. At that moment, the Prota speeds off after Muik, commenting that the battle wasn't over yet and they couldn't let their guard down. Mina turns, asking the Prota to wait, as it's not the time to seek victory and the best option would be to leave as soon as possible. He leaps and shouts back, saying he knows what he's doing. Upon reaching the boss, Baiki wastes no time and uses his shadow formation skill, creating multiple shadow clones of himself, completely surrounding Muik. Without hesitation, he and his shadow clones launch several attacks, tearing the boss apart and finishing him off. The Prota thinks he couldn't just let the boss escape, otherwise, other uncontrollable situations might arise. After the boss's defeat, the entire princess's team levels up. The system notifies the Protea that Muik, the Blood Axe, has been defeated, and as a result, he has received 320 gold coins and 15,000 soul points. With this, Baiki levels up twice, now reaching level 12. Standing over the boss's body, he thinks he has finally passed the toughest level in the Cave of Laments, allowing everyone to breathe a sigh of relief. The system also informs him that he obtained the Blood Dance Axe, a two-handed battle axe soaked in blood and flesh, which, when held, drives the user into a rage and has the unique combat ability, Blood Dance. He also received the Corpse Manipulation Skill Book, an upgradable skill that, once learned, allows the user to control corpses below level 30 that will follow commands until they die again. Lastly, he obtained the Blood Siphon item, an imitation of the Deep Space item. When used, this item allows the user to absorb the life force of creatures below level 10, gradually restoring HP. At that moment, Princess Mina approaches the Prota and apologizes, saying she shouldn't have questioned his judgment, as all of his judgments had been correct so far. She then thanks him for blocking the previous attack, adding that she owes him a favor. Baiki smiles and explains that, as he recalls, it's actually 2 favors, but they better discuss it later, suggesting they talk about it once they're truly out of there. He then reflects on what the princess said about his correct judgment, thinking it might not be entirely accurate but partially so. He wonders why things are appearing that shouldn't be there, and if everything might be connected to the Reborn. He concludes that he needs to clarify this soon, or he'll constantly face unknown dangers. They regroup, and Glory comments to the Prota that everything he did was impressive, finding it hard to believe how much he's changed in such a short time, seeming almost like a different person. Dagu, on the other hand, explains that this is the special nature of a Reborn, thanking the Prota for saving them and saying he wants to fight him to the death someday. Hoshi approaches Baisi and apologizes, saying that from the beginning, he felt hostility towards him and spoke a lot of nonsense. He feels very ashamed and apologizes again, hoping that Baiki will forgive him, as the Prota is a true hero. At that moment, the system informs the Prota that his debt of gratitude with Princess Mina's faction has been settled, and his courageous rescue has greatly boosted the faction's morale toward him, with his overall reputation now very friendly. Learning this, Baiki doesn't think much of it, as what he's really interested in are the rewards that come with the reputation system. He also thinks that while his morale is high, it's a good time to gather some information. Baiki makes it clear to everyone that he's not any kind of hero, just a reborn that the world wants to get rid of. Then he remarks that he noticed no one there seems to care much about it and asks why. Mina explains that the identity of a reborn is indeed special, but their situation is like the Protas. They're all targets. However, she adds that everyone there feels a strong connection with reborn individuals, as another very powerful reborn had helped them before. Baiki becomes intrigued upon hearing this from the princess and quickly asks if she could tell him more about this powerful reborn. As being a newly awakened reborn himself, he wants to learn more about others like him. She agrees, but turns around, suggesting it's not wise to stay there too long and that they can talk while walking. With that, they start moving through the cave, and everyone is happy to know they'll finally get out of there. However, Hoshi warns everyone to keep their guards up, as even though the boss has been defeated, many other monsters are still around. After walking a bit further, the princess comments that to talk about the reborn she mentioned earlier, she needs to start by explaining about the reborn themselves. She says that reborn are people who died and came back to life for some mysterious reason, and their common trait is that they possess some special ability. She adds that they were first discovered after the first Fallen Star War. They think and act differently from normal people, but most of them are cruel and depraved, disregarding rules and behaving as if they don't belong here. She explains that initially, nations didn't pay much attention to them until an ancient prophecy came to light. The prophecy's general meaning was that the world would collapse, and only the reborn could restore and unify everything. As a result, each nation saw them as a threat and refused to accept that the authority gained through division would be reclaimed by an outsider. However, the reborn who had helped them was different. Besides being powerful, he was very kind and polite. Without that wild and depraved aura, Looking at Baiki, the princess comments that he is indeed quite similar to that other reborn. Hearing all this leaves the Prota surprised. However, he hears the princess say that meeting them was the greatest fortune of her life. She explains that even though they have a tumultuous fate, the destiny of the reborn is much worse, as the world holds an enormous hatred for them, beyond what one could imagine. At this moment, she turns and throws a dagger towards Baiki, saying it's a gift for him. He catches it and, while examining it, hears the princess say she received the dagger from the other reborn. This is the Dark Watcher's Gaze Dagger. Although it's a dagger, its damage is comparable to that of a crafted blade and can conceal the true identity of the bearer without needing high-level items, making it impossible for one's real nature to be discerned. Baiki is intrigued, thinking he'd never seen a dagger with such powers before. Mina adds that the dagger can hide his reborn identity and reduce threats, and it might even help him find the other reborn. Hoshi, indignant, asks the princess why she gave such an important item to the Prota, as without the dagger, her identity would be exposed, which would be very dangerous. Glory agrees with Hoshi, adding that although the Prota helped them, they could have thanked him in another way. However, she smiles and says that this was her decision, and that's final. Hearing the princess's guards talking, Baiki wonders if this was his reward for raising his reputation, then imagines that the dagger itself will help him avoid being instantly recognized by stronger reborn individuals, and that the princess remains fair and kind. Looking at her with contentment, he imagines that it's precisely for this reason she won't become queen. Baiki thinks that, as the last of the Star Kingdom's lineage, Princess Mina should have a life revered as a member of the royal family. However, an unexpected disaster occurred when the world's guardian, the soul of the world, was shattered into 8 fragments by extraterrestrial invaders, causing massive upheaval. Although there were no living beings on the deep space exploration spaceship, the various unknown genes triggered mutations, filling the world with apocalyptic crises. To protect the world, the Star Kingdom mobilized its forces and fought against the mutant army, sparking the first Fallen Star War. Although they managed to annihilate much of the mutant army, the Star Kingdom exhausted its resources, and with the intentional negligence of the 8 lords during the war, the Star Kingdom collapsed, and the 8 lords declared independence, each taking a fragment of the World Stone. Although these events happened 100 years ago, as the last heir of the Star Kingdom, Princess Mina is still seen as a threat by the 8 rebel kingdoms. But the more they repress her, the more determined she becomes to restore the kingdom. Glory approaches the Prota and asks why he's standing there, deep in thought, mentioning that all the bodies along the path are plague beasts and asking if he killed them all before rescuing them, then joking that the Prota is pretty awesome, and, luckily, he didn't choose to be their enemy. At that moment, Dagu announces to everyone that the exit is just ahead, and everyone quickly cheers up and runs toward it. Upon leaving the cave, they are met with a beautiful landscape and a stunning sunset. Mina stretches out her arms and asks how long it's been since they felt such warm sun, saying that the feeling of freedom is incredible. Glory bursts into laughter, agreeing with the princess, as they no longer have to endure the dark, damp air and the terrible smell of bodies in the Cave of Laments. She turns to Baichi and says that no gratitude is enough for what he did, explaining that only when one loses freedom do they finally understand its true value. He asks her to be at ease, saying he simply did his duty, and comments that the dagger she gave him is already a huge gift. But, curious, he asks the princess what they intend to do next. Observing her, Baiki imagines that, even though he knows their next step, it's better to ask to see if anything has changed. She says there is something they need to do first. The Prota becomes curious and asks what that might be, but Glory, suspicious, replies that it's something important that can't be revealed. Hoshi intervenes, telling Glory there's no need to hide anything since the Prota is their savior and a true hero. They shouldn't keep secrets from him. Mina smiles and agrees with Hoshi, explaining that, after all, there's no reason to hide anything from Baiki, but admits she feels a bit embarrassed to discuss it. She then explains that they initially hired a group of mercenaries, but they betrayed them, leaving them in a dangerous situation with nothing, and took something very important with them, which is why they need to retrieve it. The Proto imagines it must be the Star Core, a necklace crafted from the core of the Shattered World Stone, a symbol of the royal lineage of the Star Kingdom, and one of the game's most important items. She adds that all of this happened because of her weakness and naivety, blindly believing their lies. At this moment, Hoshi becomes furious and punches the rocks, saying that none of this was the princess's fault, explaining that they were too weak to protect her and the sacred artifact. Glory also feels frustrated, saying their weakness was only part of the problem. The bigger issue was that the mercenaries disguised themselves too well, and they fell for it. Dagu lowers his head, explaining that even he couldn't detect any suspicious scent and fears it will be difficult to find them again now. After hearing her guard's regrets, the princess fills with determination and says she will find them, even if she has to chase them to the ends of the earth, no matter how long it takes. Baichi smiles and tells the princess she won't have to go that far, and it won't take long, because he knows where they are. He then asks her if she would believe him. Hearing this surprises everyone, as the Proto suddenly brought it up. Hoshi, not wasting time, shouts, asking if Baichi really knows where those guys are, urging him not to joke about serious matters. Glory remarks that the Proto truly is full of surprises, and also asks if he realizes how important this is to them. Princess Mina remains quiet and thoughtful. Baichi clarifies that he isn't joking, and asks if he has lied to them even once so far. Hoshi agrees with the Proto, then comments that, despite the complications, he's never deceived them. Mina becomes serious and explains that they're still somewhat wary of the Proto, apologizing because it's surreal relief to feel this weight lifted so easily, as she was prepared for the worst. Baiki places his hands on the princess's shoulders and asks her not to worry. Although he can't explain why, he can show her exactly where the mercenaries who betrayed her are, and they just need to follow him. Hearing this leaves her completely embarrassed, but she quickly responds that she trusts the Proto. Hoshi, seeing Baichi so close to the princess, tells him to take it easy as she's a lady, but Glory jokes with Hoshi, saying the princess isn't complaining, so he should stop interrupting. Meanwhile, in the charred jungle, where the perpetual underground fire scorches the vegetation but hasn't completely eradicated life. Instead, it maintains a relatively balanced ecosystem. For those who dislike the cold, damp northern regions, the burned jungle might indeed be an alternative settlement option. It's a place where various strange creatures live, hunting one another to survive. Yet, every hunter, one day, becomes the prey. A group of people is gathered around a campfire, complaining about the burned jungle, claiming it's no place for humans as they endure the hellish heat caused by the local ecosystem. Another person comments that the lizard they killed is turning out to be quite delicious. Here, the mercenary group known as Just Alliance is camping with approximately 30 members ranging from levels 20 to 30. They mention that, compared to what they earn, the little suffering they're enduring is nothing, and they should be grateful to the foolish Princess Mina, who was easily deceived and revealed her true identity. Michelle, a level 28 warrior, remarks that he doesn't understand why they need to remain in the burned jungle, as he can't wait to reach the city and spend some money. In response, Kura, a level 27 swordsman, says that the boss mentioned having his reasons but didn't explain why. Yuri, a level 29 mage and the group's deputy commander, grows impatient and quickly asks the boss how much longer they'll have to wait there, adding that even as a fire mage, he hates the heat of the burned jungle. At that moment, Hedis, the leader of the Just Alliance mercenaries, approaches while looking at the necklace in his hand, with everyone curious about its backstory. Hedis smiles and asks what they were discussing, making it clear that he's not deaf, and explaining that the reason they've been waiting there for so many days is to ensure nothing goes wrong, since he's unsure if Princess Mina and her guards will manage to escape the Cave of Lamentation. He admits that, because of this, he's starting to regret not having killed them from the start. Michelle tells the boss he's being overly cautious, arguing that, given the princess's and her guards' abilities, there's absolutely no way they could survive in the Cave of Lamentations. Kira agrees with Michelle, betting his life that Princess Mina's group will end up as food for the Plague Clan. Yuri, however, becomes furious, wondering why the princess rejected his boss's kindness. Hedis recalls the moment when the princess yelled at him, calling his group evil and demanding to know why he betrayed her after she had trusted him. In response, he grabbed her face and made it clear that, for them, what she said was completely contradictory, as it all depended on the level of reward they would receive. Their criteria for judgment were quite flexible. He emphasized that he hadn't betrayed her, but rather helped her. He then asked if she truly wanted to restore her country, for with their help, she would have to work far less for many years, in exchange for the legendary necklace and her as his woman. Disgusted by what he had just proposed, she told him that if she fell into his hands, he could do whatever he wanted with her. But as for the necklace, he should forget about it, for she would never give it to him. She even stated that she would rather die than hand over the necklace. Hedis smiled and turned away, saying she was a very stubborn woman who apparently didn't value her own life. Saying this, he gestured to his men, who quickly prepared to kill her guards, while the leader of the mercenaries asked the princess if she cared about her friends' lives. He then remarked that they were a bunch of useless trash, but had a loyalty that was almost admirable. With this, she began trembling with rage, unable to believe Hedis's cruelty, but there was nothing she could do because if she refused to hand over the necklace, her friends' lives would be over. After recalling this, Hedis puts on the necklace he had taken from the princess and remarks that the people of this world were quite stupid and therefore didn't deserve to live in it. He then mentioned the princess, calling her an incompetent person whose abilities did not match her ambitions. He said this and immediately informed everyone that they would stay in the burned jungle for just one more night, and that, as soon as dawn broke, they would head to the next village of Anka. Everyone quickly agreed with Hedis. The warrior grabbed a girl by the arm and commented that it was more than time to leave that infernal place, as they definitely needed to replenish their ranks with some fresh blood, since he was tired of all the women in the group. He said this and left with the woman slung over his shoulder, remarking that they had talked enough and it was time to stretch their muscles. Yuri, observing his friend, commented that he truly couldn't stay still for a moment, and that if he wasn't eating or sleeping, he was either fighting or enjoying himself with women, always with endless energy. Yuri then asks Hedis what he plans to do with the princess's necklace, as it wouldn't be wise to keep it without purpose since the item is worth a fortune, and it would be best to sell it as soon as possible, especially since all 8 countries are searching for Princess Mina because of the necklace. The mage also points out that if they handle it well, they wouldn't have to worry about food and shelter for the rest of their lives anytime soon. At that moment, Hedis stabs Akurabo with his dagger and agrees with Yuri. He then throws the furball aside and comments that he would never have imagined that the simple mission of escorting the princess would bring so much fortune. He goes on to say that he was thinking of maximizing their profits with the necklace and had considered selling it to a certain country, but the closest one is the Duchy of Elena. There, however, the people are nothing more than a bunch of poor wretches who barely have enough for themselves. He then considers selling it to the County of Hades, as they truly have money. However, Hedis notes that he has heard Hades and Wembak are involved in a small-scale war over border issues. He makes it clear that now would be the perfect time to sell the necklace. Hedis explains that the County of Hades, represented by the lion crest, has classes of counts and knights, with their peasant characteristics symbolized by a lion's crest. They are rich in mountains and mineral resources, have excellent blacksmiths, and a powerful army. Meanwhile, the Duchy of Elena, with the rose crest, consists of classes like the queen, nobles, and commoners, symbolized by a rose crest, boasting abundant agricultural fields and flower gardens, as well as outstanding painters and writers. Lastly, the county of Wembach, represented by the bear paw and axe crest, includes classes of counts, knights, and commoners, symbolized by a bear paw and axe crest, with forests and hunting grounds, along with excellent hunters and carpenters. Hedis also mentions that the influence of that small necklace is the essence of war and power. He explains that even in that chaotic world, the necklace remains unchanged and that there are rumors it was inherited by a royal orphan with the power to change the world. It can be said that the value of the necklace surpasses the combined benefits of all wars tenfold. Yuri, intrigued by this explanation, asks if the necklace is truly that powerful. He then speculates that they could keep the necklace and use its power to establish their own country. Hedis replies that he had already considered that, but after studying it for these past few days, he concluded that the necklace is just an ordinary jewel in their hands, since he hasn't felt any power emanating from it. He then stands up and asks Yuri to forget about it, because if anyone wishes to live a long life, it's best not to covet powers that cannot be controlled. He also makes it clear that they were not like the fanatics of the cult of suffering who use their own flesh and blood in exchange for power, as in this short life, it's more important to make money and live happily than anything else. Yuri agrees with his leader, but then grows curious and asks how Hedis knows so many secrets. Hedis turns around and, with a smile, responds that this is something Yuri doesn't need to know. He then instructs him to prepare the members for dawn, as they will make a major move on the village of Anka. Some time passes, and finally, the princess's group reaches the burned jungle. Baiti swiftly eliminates the members of the Just Alliance mercenary group who are on patrol. Glory comments that they are quite cautious, and that, if it weren't for the protagonist's quick action, the entire camp would have been alerted. The princess, while observing the camp, remarks that the mercenaries have the advantage in levels and numbers, wondering how they will retrieve the necklace in a situation where they are completely outmatched. Hoshi comments that he would love to raid their camp and take the necklace, but doing so would be suicide under the current circumstances. Dagu suggests that he could distract most of the mercenaries, while the others seize the opportunity to attack the leader. Glory, intrigued by Dagu's plan, questions him, wanting to know how he intends to distract the mercenaries, suggesting that it would be better to wait until late at night to sneak in and grab the necklace. However, the protagonist, overhearing all this, makes it clear that they don't have time to wait until nightfall, as there are still 3 hours left. He explains that when the mercenaries find the bodies during the next patrol, the entire camp will be on high alert since their leader is extremely cautious. Mina approaches the protagonist and comments that the mercenary leader is indeed very difficult to deal with, stating that he's not only skilled, but also possesses an exceptionally sharp mind. She then considers that perhaps they should temporarily give up and look for another way to get the necklace. However, Baishi says there is still a chance. Everyone is quickly surprised, wanting to know if the protagonist really has a plan. He smiles and reveals that, although they are outnumbered, he has a way to make up for the difference. He explains that deep within the burned jungle, there's a nest of red fire spiders. Although these spiders are only around levels 10 to 20, their numbers are astonishing. Baiki outlines his plan. First, they should head to the spider nest, ensuring their own safety, and then try to lure as many high-level monsters as possible. The goal is to lead them straight to the mercenary camp. Once there, they simply need to transfer the spider's aggro onto the mercenaries. Glory comments that no matter how many common monsters there are, it will still be difficult to reduce the number of mercenaries since the monsters' levels are low. Hoshi agrees, but emphasizes that the role of the spiders is merely to create chaos unexpectedly, pointing out that this will be the key to the plan's success. However, the protagonist notes that all of this will only work if he can attract the Red Fire Spider Queen to the mercenary camp. Glory, intrigued, tells the protagonist that his plan is impressive, but it's not so simple to execute because, first of all, it's impossible for everyone to remain stealthy and avoid combat. Hoshi explains that only the princess and Dagu can use invisibility spells. Concerned, the princess explains that her invisibility spell can only be used on herself and cannot be cast on a group. She also mentions that once she and Dagu turn invisible, the spider's aggro will shift to Hoshi and Glory, which is very risky. Hoshi listens to this and reassures everyone not to worry about him, making it clear that as long as they can recover the necklace, the threat of the spiders is nothing. He then asks Dagu, in case he dies, to take care of the princess. The tiger cub responds that he will. At that moment, the protagonist turns around and makes it clear to everyone that if they strictly follow his plan, no one will die. Bai Qi then asks everyone to accept some items he will provide for the plan. The Potion of Solitude, which, when consumed, grants temporary invisibility. Although there are no class restrictions, the side effects are unknown, and also the original artifact from deep space, Divine Whispers, a product of the native technology of the Deep Space Pioneer ship, which allows free communication within a radius of 1,000 meters. If special conditions are met, communication can be conducted regardless of space and distance. Lastly, there's the Ice Grenade, a magical device with an area freeze effect that slows down enemies' movements. Everyone is stunned by the items the protagonist just handed out, immediately wondering where he obtained all these items, as it made no sense for a novice like him to have access to so many incredible things. Bai Qi remarks that it doesn't matter how he acquired them, emphasizing that what matters is that, with these items, his plan can proceed smoothly. Mina, intrigued, comments that probably not even the kings of the 8 nations could pull off what the protagonist just did, since original deep space artifacts are extremely rare and exclusively used by royalty, being the highest reward for nobles and knights who have made significant contributions. The princess further explains that although the emergence of the Deep Space Observers Academy has popularized replicated items, their inferior functions have only highlighted the value of the originals. Even within the 8 countries, there is a religious cult that worships the original deep space artifacts, with nobles among its followers. She explains that this Deep Space Observers Academy is an independent research institute, separate from the 8 nations. They convert the results of reverse engineering into military power and sell it to the highest bidding countries. The results of their research have promoted technological progress in the human world while simultaneously making humans more violent. Meanwhile, the original deep space artifacts are highly coveted on the black market and can reach exorbitant prices. After hearing the princess's explanation, the protagonist questions her, asking if she used her ancestral items to hire mercenaries on the black market, only to lose all her money and the ancestral necklace in the process. She is shocked by this, wondering how the protagonist knew such information. He casually comments that he simply guessed, but internally, he believes he knows everything about her. However, he reassures her not to worry, promising that everything will be restored. Mina feels embarrassed by the protagonist's words, thinking that he always manages to convey a sense of comfort. At that moment, a system message appears, notifying him that the main mission has been updated. He must help Princess Mina recover the Star Core. The mission's reward includes more unlock points for the new account. He is pleased with this, thinking that his wish was granted, and then asks the system about other ways to earn more new account unlock rewards. The system informs him that currently there are 3 ways. The first is to complete designated tasks, the second is to defeat deserters, and the third is to accumulate soul points for redemption. Bai Qi considers that these methods aren't too difficult, planning to focus on gathering more points after helping the princess recover the Star Core, noting that there is only one uncertain factor in his current plan, which needs to be verified through real combat. He then instructs everyone to prepare, as they are nearing the boss's nest, and directs them to activate their communicators to stay in constant contact throughout the plan. With that, everyone gets ready to act immediately, Upon reaching the red fire spider's nest, they encounter her level 5 hatchlings and immediately begin stomping on them. Hoshi comments that it feels great as it's relieving all his stress. Princess Mina then uses her ability, creating a magic circle that triggers multiple explosions in the area. She turns around and urges them to stop playing around, reminding them that they are running out of time. As per the protagonist's plan, they need to destroy enough eggs to enrage the spider. After she says this, everyone starts using their skills and destroying everything. At that moment, they successfully draw the aggro of the larger spiders, commenting that Bai Chi was right once again. With that, they start running at full speed while the spiders chase after them. Mina reminds everyone that, according to the plan, they shouldn't use the items given by the protagonist until they are close to the mercenary camp. Meanwhile, back in the spider's lair, the queen senses her offspring being attacked and becomes enraged. The protagonist, noticing this, asks the spider if she really felt her eggs being destroyed, as it meant that the princess and her team had successfully executed the first step of the plan. He then prepares himself, remarking that now it's his turn. However, before he can finish saying this, the queen spider attacks him furiously, demanding to know how a mere human dares to challenge her, accusing him of seeking death. Bai Chi turns around confidently and asks the spider if she truly wants to know his purpose. Saying this, he delivers a powerful strike to one of the queen's legs. At that moment, the spider transforms, approaching him and making it clear that she finds strong males irresistible. Now that her eggs have been destroyed, she suggests they mate to produce beautiful offspring. Bai Chi, realizing her intentions, asks if she means that thing where she injects neurotoxins into the body before devouring it. He says this, then swiftly decapitates her, declaring he has no interest in being part of her breeding farm. Suddenly, an explosion occurs, and the queen spider reverts to her original form, enraged, screaming at the protagonist that he's a fool. She spits a jet of neurotoxin in his direction, but he dashes away at full speed through the trees, dodging the venom, knowing that the boss's rage has reached its peak. However, the goal at that moment isn't to engage in battle. After gaining some distance, Bai Chi realizes he can't stray too far or he'll lose the spider's aggro, which would severely jeopardize the plan. So he stops, but fails to notice the queen spider right above him. She then casts a massive web at him. He manages to dodge, but the webs the boss threw are incredibly sharp, slicing through the ground effortlessly upon impact. Bai Chi recalls that in the original game, the spider's territorial awareness was strong, and no matter how much you provoked her, she would never leave her territory. She attempts to attack him again, but he barely manages to dodge in time. The spider taunts him, wondering why he's only trying to escape, suggesting he's intimidated by her domain. The protagonist, realizing he has lured her to the edge of her territory, wonders if the spider will act differently at this point. He then gets an idea and decides to test it, shouting to the boss that he's under orders from his captain to steal her silk, and furthermore, that there are at least 30 strong, robust men in their camp. He then asks her what she thinks about that. The spider, taken aback, quickly charges after him, declaring that if he's lying, he's as good as dead. As he runs from the boss, Bai Chi feels pleased, realizing that his idea actually worked and that this world indeed follows the original game's scenario. Though not completely faithfully, he concludes that he can rely on his understanding of the game and his creative thinking to accomplish things that were impossible in the previous game. With this realization, he feels even more excited, sensing that he's truly getting the hang of the game again. That's all, folks. If you enjoy the video, subscribe and hit the bell. Thanks.